Yeah. Hello everyone, welcome to Social Flow's global headquarters here in New York City. I'm here with, once again, CEO Jim Anderson. Today we want to talk about the fact that commercials are coming to Facebook Live, if they're not already here in some form. Jim, tell us the news.
Yeah, so this week Ad Age put a story out there saying that Facebook has started to experiment with mid-roll in Facebook Live video. So mid-roll is essentially a commercial break. They raised a lot more questions than they have answers at this point. It's clear that it's just experimentation. But Facebook is putting up to 15-second mid-roll in the midst of a Facebook Live broadcast and allowing media content creators, publishers to experiment with inserting essentially commercials into their broadcasts.
Okay, so this is a new thing that's coming. What do publishers and content creators have to think about?
Well, there's a couple of key things. So first off, we think this is a fantastic development. Monetization is the key. If you can't find a way to make money off of doing this, then it's not going to be a sustainable business model. Two key questions, though, come to mind. First off is who controls the advertiser relationship here? Is this Facebook selling advertisements that the media companies can then insert into their content, and that could be fine? Or is it media companies who have their own advertiser relationships can take video content, say 15-second mid-roll, and insert it in their own broadcast? So that's one key question, is who controls the advertiser relationship, and therefore how do the dollars flow?
We don't know the answer to that yet.
We don't know the answer to that yet, and I think that's up for Facebook to determine and to negotiate with the media companies. Again, this is very early on, so a lot more questions than answers at this point. The second is what you call dynamic insertion of the advertisement. So that sounds a little wonky, but yeah, the real question is okay.
It is called dynamic.
Dynamic insertion. So the question is, think about this. If you were to watch a rerun of I Love Lucy on television, are you going to see a commercial for Chesterfield cigarettes? I mean, that may be in the commercial that ran originally. Well, of course not, right? Chesterfield cigarettes don't even exist anymore. And so if, to make a more present-day example, if I have a piece of content and it's sponsored by Starbucks, then am I going to, if this video is archived and being watched 6 months from now, still want to show a Starbucks ad, even though the campaign is done and maybe even Starbucks doesn't want to advertise anymore. So you really have to have the ability to have the advertisement be dynamic and independent of the content itself, and matching those two things up together is the real challenge.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be surprised that we're talking about I Love Lucy and Facebook Live. The two don't really seem analogous, or at least in terms of decades. So this adds a whole new layer to, I would assume, well, it's going to producing video, live video, because before, as we've done ourselves, we come on, we talk, and then we're done. Now we have to watch a clock, which is why we have a clock here. We know, we think we know, around 5 minutes, we're going to have to take a commercial break. We're not sure who controls that break, whether or not it's something that we have to reach forward and press a little button which the commercial break runs, or whether the machines take over. In TV, my experience in television, cable news especially, is there are things called soft breaks and hard breaks. Soft breaks are when we could slide the commercial time. If you and I are having a really intense debate, perhaps, we could slide that break. We have a little bit of leeway. The hard break is when suddenly the machines take over and you're just cut off.
Right.
And that happens a lot, and there's always a lot of yelling behind the scenes when that happens, because it's very, very awkward, and an anchor is in mid, and they get cut off. So
right.
Let's say we have a hard break today. We know we'll see how hard it is, because we know we have a hard break coming up in a minute 20. So this is something people are going to have to, I don't know if you're going to hire more people, or someone to keep an eye on the clock, another producer, an associate producer, but this makes things more tricky. Is that fair to say?
It does. I mean, it introduces a whole level of complexity, certainly, to creating a live broadcast. So in addition to the timing and the fact that I've now got 1 minute and 2 seconds to give you the rest of my answer, or be interrupted if we take a hard break, you need to think about, just because we've decided the 5-minute mark is when we want to take the commercial break, well, what if we see the audience starting to dwindle? Or what if the audience is rising, and if we wait another minute, we're going to have 30% more people watching? Those are the types of things that I think you're going to want to consider. There's also targeting. The people on the other end of this, some people may see one thing and some people may see another, depending on their gender, their geography, other types of targeting criteria. So there's a number of things in addition to the timing that need to be considered. And obviously much of that is planned ahead of time. We're not going to decide on the fly who sees what version of the ad. Right. That has to be determined in advance. But then actually adjusting our conversation and tailoring the answers so that we can line up right with the timing is a bit tricky.
So I'm watching the time. You have to, in TV Line, you have to stretch now, because we have 9 seconds. So
I think you're doing a great job of stretching.
Instead of getting cut off, well, look, now we're at 5 minutes, so take us to commercial break. All right, so now I think we almost hit it.
I think you were 2 seconds off, but
that's going to be the thing, is either you stop and you have time to fill, or you get cut off. And one of the things we talked about is, like, if there's a demonstration, for instance, and things are getting very, very violent, or and you perhaps don't want the audience to see it, you might want that soft break, so you can go to commercial breaks. You don't want people at home to see it. So there are it seems like there are a lot of issues here to be ironed out. But let's talk about stuff that's obviously in your wheelhouse, which all this is. Which is can we talk about how the dollars would flow in terms of these commercial breaks, whether or not they're hard breaks or soft breaks?
Yeah, well, so I think the key first off is that the relationship with the Facebook relationship with the advertiser, or the media content creator's relationship with the advertiser, because that's going to dictate two different flows. But either way, you can imagine that Facebook's going to get some proportion because it's bringing the audience to the table, and the media content creator is going to get some proportion. The relative proportion will, I'm sure, depend on who sold the ad package and who has the relationship with the advertiser, and I'm sure is subject to negotiation. So we'll see how that plays out over time. That'll be up to sort of the market to determine what's going to happen.
And what are the issues you see between the content creator, publisher, and advertiser that we haven't discussed?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is how much of the audience comes while we're actually live right now at 3:08 p.m. on Tuesday, August the 4th, and how much of the audience comes later. And it's an interesting situation. There's a few exceptions where the lion's share of your audience is really going to come when it's live. If there's something big going on that everybody knows about, if it's a giant sporting event, if it's an incredibly noteworthy piece of news, then maybe that's going to draw people in because they know that something important is going on. Probably more common, and we saw this as an example with Chewbacca Mom, which was one of the most successful videos out there. Most of the views, probably 98% of those views, if not more like 99% of the views, came after the fact, right? So it became a viral sensation. Hey, this is wonderful, it's uplifting, it's fun to watch, but it's happening well after it was originally live.
Yeah.
And so it's important to think about the distribution and the lifespan of a video. It could have a very long tail. It could be days, weeks, it could be even months or years long where the video is archived and still gets some amount of attention after the fact.
And if that story has changed, or if something's happened that makes, imagine if you found out something about Chewbacca Mom, there's a new story about her, perhaps it was unflattering, or perhaps it was extremely flattering, but the ad that was attached to that no longer wants to be associated with it. What do you do? Because that thing's out there and it's being played and played and played.
Well, that's the importance of the dynamic insertion, right? If you've essentially hard-coded that ad
I've already found that word, because it's not a common word, dynamic insertion. So, okay, so talk about dynamic insertion again, sorry.
Well, again, so the question is one of the interesting things about any content creation, any form of advertising, is the advertiser wants to know what kind of content they're going to be associated with. And as you well know, doing a live broadcast makes it a lot more challenging. I mean, we knew what we were going to talk about today. We knew that it was unlikely to be incredibly controversial or something that an advertiser wouldn't want to associate with. But you don't always know that with live. If you're out on the streets covering an event, something significant can happen, and you'd want to say, okay, this is not an appropriate time for a commercial break. The advertiser's not going to want to be associated with a negative story, controversy, any kind of significant news event on the negative side, and advertisers are not going to want to be associated with that. So there has to be some judgment, and it does certainly raise the question of who's in control. And again, this is one of these questions that I don't think has been fully ironed out, but I would have to believe that the person creating the content, us here in this room, are in control of the broadcast, and then we can decide, okay, it's an appropriate time to cut to the commercial break like we did, or it's not an appropriate time because of the subject matter or just the timing and flow of the conversation is not something we want to interrupt with a commercial break.
I mean, it's probably worth pointing out the only reason we were able to get the Panda to have a Panda commercial was because this was a very PC sort of subject matter. There was nothing controversial.
There's nothing controversial, and it was also a fairly controlled environment, and reasonably sure about what we're going to talk about. If we were walking around out on the street, number one, it'd be awfully odd to be walking around with a panda bear following us out on the streets of New York, and number two, it's again, you're in a much more unpredictable situation.
Now, because I'm not a great multitasker, and this is obviously one of the things that's going to happen based on this new world of commercials and when to take them stuff, and I was paying so much attention to the clock. Have we talked about different types of advertising, like the mid-roll?
Yeah, let's talk about that. We have not. So mid-roll, I think, I don't know that technical definition, but it's essentially a commercial break in the middle somewhere of the broadcast.
Yep.
Now, whether it's literally in the middle or not, it's just not. It's distinguished from pre-roll,
right,
which precedes the broadcast, or post-roll, which is at the end.
Pre-roll is something you always face. If you ever want to watch anything on YouTube and it's
yeah,
music, whatever, you're forced to watch that pre-roll.
Pre-roll, advertisers, not surprisingly, tend to like pre-roll because it sort of forces the
right,
user to watch the advertisement. We've seen that Facebook and even Mark Zuckerberg himself has been quoted as saying that they don't like pre-roll. They don't think it delivers a good user experience. So again, that's Facebook's platform. It's their decision to make, but at least as it stands now, it does not look like Facebook wants to do pre-roll. Post-roll is, not offensive to anybody, but not very appealing to advertisers because who's going to stick around at the end of the program and watch a commercial? So,
right,
so that would be unoffensive, but not very effective. So mid-roll seems to be the compromise, and really mid-roll can be anywhere in the broadcast. And I think, again, Facebook's going to set standards. It wouldn't surprise me if they said the first commercial break and commercial opportunity comes about 5 minutes into a broadcast. So you're not going to have mid-roll 3 seconds into the broadcast. That's
right,
essentially disguised pre-roll
right,
at that point. So they'll set some standards up. And then the other question is if the broadcast goes on long enough, if we have a 20-minute broadcast, maybe we have a break at 10 minutes and at 20 minutes, or maybe there's a 10, 15, and 20. And so now you get into your world of television, the commercial load. How many commercial breaks, how many breaks, and for what duration can you put in a broadcast before you degrade the user experience?
And the big thing everyone always does is everyone always figures out, are people surfing at half past the hour? Like, a lot of people don't want to be in commercial break at 12:00,
right,
12:00, because that's when people are surfing, and if you're in a commercial break, you're not going to get them back. So there's all these sort of things about you can't take a commercial break until sort of 12:04 or whatever, all these different, and you can't have commercials too close together. So all right, so these are a lot of new issues.
One thing I want to add to what you just said, I think this is where Facebook's going to have a really significant advantage. I mean, they're a very data-driven company. They have incredible usage statistics about who's watching what, and so they can show a graph of on this video of what the usage was at what period of time, and so it wouldn't be hard to optimize the distribution, load, and the placement of the commercial breaks based on historic patterns and based even on live patterns of what's going on. So I think we've just scratched the surface. Obviously, they're just now beginning to experiment with the mid-roll video, so we don't know the answers to these things yet, but I can easily imagine that they'll be able to come up with some ways, and then obviously part of our business is to help media companies optimize both the distribution and the monetization of their content. I think there'll be a lot of ways that we can try to avoid what you were just describing.
I don't want to stump you here, but I might be a little bit. Since we've seen, unless there was a crazy protest going behind us now, and you're going to have more people, you get more viewers after the fact. So when it's not actually live, we talked about the life of these videos. We found with just the stuff that we do, we get a lot more views later on because people stumble on it. It's featured higher in their feed. We know videos are being promoted well because we did the research. We know all about that. So could there be rates for live versus later on life of video? I mean, there's sort of different rates, or will it just be we'll send you a bill or you'll get paid based on, I don't know, X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I think there certainly could be. I think complexity is always the challenge with any advertising relationship, and if you make your ad product and your ad offering too complex for the advertiser, that's probably not going to be very successful. So I'd be surprised if that came up early on, but as you think about different ways to vary it, if there really is a different value perceived by the advertiser from a live broadcast versus the archived footage after the fact, then a very logical thing to do might be to offer a discount for one or the other. And again, with the dynamic insertion, that gives you the ability to do that. It's like, okay, you paid for a live insertion, you didn't pay for after the fact, or vice versa, and so you can sort of tailor your advertising offerings accordingly. Certainly the platform and the capability, platform will support it and the capability will be there. Whether anybody chooses to sell it that way is a different question.
And one last question. So if I'm sort of CBS Sunday Morning and I have a relationship with, I don't know, Aruba or some sort of retirement fund, IRA, all based at people over 60 and older, and they always have this relationship, those commercials play and they find good results. If they do Facebook Lives related to the show, could they have an influence over what commercials run, or is it all up to Facebook?
Well, no, I believe it's going to be the media company has a role in the targeting of the advertising. I think it's going to differ again depending on whether the media company has sold the advertisement or Facebook has sold the advertisement. And again, this is one of the many details that I think even Facebook has to sort out is what level of control do you give. But ultimately, if you're the content creator, you need to be able to control, at least to some degree, the association of advertising with that. And if you're the advertiser coming in on the flip side, you're going to want to be able to control to some degree the content with which you're associated. So working out that marriage of advertisement with content to make sure that it's contextually relevant and that it's appropriate is something that both Facebook and the media company have a strong interest in getting right.
Okay, I think, is there anything we haven't covered?
I think we've covered it about
all
pretty well here.
And we've gone, we usually don't keep track of time, but today we are. This is 15 minutes, so technically we could have had another soft or hard break.
We could have
in here. Maybe we'll go back and insert one in. What did you call it again?
Dynamic insertion.
Dynamic insertion. So maybe we'll sort that out and we'll get paid for this. All right, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you same time, same place next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
And this has been brilliant. Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.